Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to FIDE Master series. This is the round number 4 of the Polish First League. After yesterday's win, both individually and as a team, we had our appetite growing. So let's see how my game went and how does the team do as of now. Without further ado, let's start. In this game I played against Krzysztof Żarnowski. I believe he's the same age as myself, however, we did not play each other yet. I may be mistaken, so sorry for that in advance. Anyway, my opponent opted for b3, which already caught me by surprise. I was mostly preparing against either d4 or knight f3. I saw one game with b3, so I was not so worried about it, but here we are. I played mostly d5, so I felt like my opponent might be prepared for it, so I decided to change things a little bit and enter something that may not now be my best choice, but maybe my opponent is also not prepared for it. So e5, logical move, because I am attempting to stop this bishop from being very active one. And after e3 I was debating between d5, which I believe is, if not the most common move, is one of the most common for sure. But I opted to play a6 in order to stop bishop from jumping to the b5 square, because that's the common problem after d5, bishop b5, and those two bishops are pressurizing my knight, my pawn, so my center is a good one, but it needs protection. So I decided to play a6. So my opponent changed the ideas a little bit and opted for c4, followed by knight f3, hitting my pawn. I'm not really sure if I am ever allowed to push e4, and even if I am, I would not like to play such position, so I decided to take a safer route and go to the d6, and after d4 I had once again quite an easy decision, at least for myself, because once again I would not be playing e4 and I have to do something about this pressure. So I took, and after my opponent took, I realized that I might be a little bit worse here, because this bishop on b2 will be once again open, as you can tell, because my e5 pawn is gone. So my initial approach did not work as imagined, and moreover I felt like the double fianchetto might be incoming at some point, so I was not sure if I like my position, and because of this double fianchetto, meaning that g3, bishop g2 maybe might be played, I decided to play bishop d7, which should allow me to, after g3 is played, take on d4, plant my knight on this diagonal and be happy about it. So for that reason I believe opponent did not play g3 and opted for bishop e2, a simple developing move. And I felt like at this point I have a decision how to develop the dark squared bishop. I opted for the fianchetto in order to have some counter power, let's say, to this opponent's bishop, but I got myself into a little bit of trouble. How and why? Well, I will show you if I played g6 at that point. The problem is that after knight takes c6, bc, queen f3, I am hit both on f6 and c6, and I might be losing some material here. So for that reason, before I decided to play bishop d7, on top of that fianchetto stuff that I talked about, but also at that point after bishop e2, I felt like, okay, now the c6 knight is protected, so I have the time to do it. So I played g6, bishop f3, bishop g7, and my opponent, to my surprise, took on c6. And within like 3 seconds, I felt the heat coming from my body. I had to take off my hoodie because I saw what's the idea behind it. Basically, even though I added one more defender to the c6 square, and opponent zigzagged his way to take there, so I felt like there are many tempos wasted. Actually, it still works, because if I take, let's say, with the bishop and then queen f3 is once again on the board, even though I have the knight on f6 fully defended and no worries about it, c6 pawn is a different story, because I cannot play queen d7, because then the knight would be actually hanging, and I cannot defend the pawn in any other way. d5 seems very, very odd and wrong. So like c5, it's natural, right? But after queen c6, the idea is that I am still under the double attack, and it does not allow me to cover the check. It does not allow me to cover the check that way either, because of the bishop, so I actually have to move the king either here or there, and I was actually considering this variation. King f8 was my main option here, but I felt like even though it was looking like I'm solid enough to not be that much worse, I felt like long term I would be suffering, so I didn't want to live with that, and I decided to, okay, look for something different, and I opted for b takes c6 with the idea of just giving the pawn away. How? Well, after queen f3, which is a logical follow-up, I would play castle, and I will just show you guys what happens again after c5. So knight c6 is coming, and the problem is that my queen does not have too many squares for it, and once again it is, let's say, glued to the defense of the knight. So after takes takes, we would be entering the same variation, and that's the problem once again. However, after queen f3, I was planning on playing castle with the idea that after knight c6, queen e8, I freed up the e8 square for my queen by castling, and with that I am putting the pressure to the c6 knight. And the problem is for white what to do with this knight. So I calculated many of the variations. Both myself and opponent spent like around 20 minutes of each time, so altogether we calculated for 40 minutes or something like that, such complications. And the problem for him would be that after, let's say, knight d4, c5, knight e2, I might be having some ideas of, let's say, bishop g4, and I will just give you the simple line that if queen goes to some dark square, I have the knight h5 hitting the queen, hitting the bishop, and then after the bishop the rook. So as you can tell from the eval bar, I'm winning, but obviously fun stuff will be happening after his queen b7. And as I've said to you guys, such, let's say, maneuver, such position might be occurring in many variations. So for example, knight would not go to e2 from d4 square but rather c2, and so also plenty of little small details that would be changing with each variation, so plenty of implications of that and so on. So yeah, and that's what I have to calculate at the time. But as you can tell, even though I am a pawn down, I have the initiative because I am the one chasing opponent's queen. Computer, as you can tell, also likes this. I was not sure, I didn't think that I would have like 1.7 advantage at that point. I just was hoping to not lose the pawn without consequences for the opponent, and as you can tell, it worked. So yeah, I spent quite a lot of time on calculating this. However, my opponent did not play queen f3 for very different reasons, because he calculated knight g4. This was his main move, and the problem for him is that I can actually sack my queen, and this is something that he was calculating for a long time. I just did not spend a single second on this because I didn't see such a variation and continuation. And what's the variation? Knight c6, bishop b2, abandoning the queen, and after knight d8 I can just simply recapture the knight, and the point is that the rook has nowhere to go. So my opponent calculated a line of let's say knight c3, bishop c3, king e2, bishop a1, something along those lines, and he felt like his material advantage with the queen would be not sufficient because I have the knight, I have the bishop, I have a rook for it, so plenty of pieces, and for that reason we can both agree together with the computer that it's not working for him. So this is why he abandoned the idea, but I wanted to play castle. And we had a chat after the game, and he said that if he knew that I would have castled, he would play queen f3. But as I've said, in this variation I would be also happy. So plenty of complications in what felt like very calm situation, but that's something that's happening. Anyway, for those reasons my opponent decided to play h3. Simple move, just releasing the tension, allowing me to do whatever I want. So for that reason, perhaps taking on c6 at that point was just an inaccuracy, because my opponent lost bishop pair, lost the momentum, so I should not be facing any difficulties after h3. So I castled simply, and after his developing move, I don't have much to do rather than push c5 and plant my bishop to the graded diagonal. So I should not be worse here because of the bishop pair, because of the solid structure, and perhaps even advantage in development, because as you can tell, opponent has not castled yet. But after his castle now, I did not know how to approach this position, because one idea that is clear for me would be to try to push a pawn in order to exchange the pawns on b3 and create a long-term weakness there. However, I felt like it might not be sufficient for a win, especially with so many pieces on the board, so I decided to release the tension a little bit and exchange few minor pieces. However, when I did that, I figured that I just wasted 2 moves in order to jump from the knight from f6 to c3, forcing exchanges, so I felt like my momentum is also gone. So after a few more moves, which is bishop c3, queen g5, knight f4, I felt like I might not be having any chances to win the game, because even if I, let's say, exchange the dark squared bishop and somehow pushed this pawn so much forward and so on, in the end, after further exchange, I felt like this weakness would be the only one. As you can tell from the previous video, from the previous day, I grinded my way out in the rook endgame for like 5.5 hours, and I did not want the repetition today. So I just, after playing rook f2 e8, offered a draw, which my opponent accepted, but not instantly, since he knew that his position is not that great in terms of looking for any winning chances. However, he had to check the boards on his from his teammates, because we were the one that finished the earliest, because all the other boards as of now at the time of the recording are still playing. So I can tell that I gave myself a little bit time off. Now it's time to cheer for my team, and I will do that right after recording this. So guys, and that's the position. Just final thoughts. I believe that there is nothing to be done here, and actually my opponent can try to take over the initiative after taking here, giving a check, and now playing queen a5 that I believe we both missed, because now my only idea is just gone. But at the same time, white does not have a clear idea either, so as I told you guys, it should be a draw. So that's that for this game. Hopefully my team will win this match. I will give the update tomorrow in the next recap, and as of now, thank you all for watching. I will give you the review. Let's check this out. Hopefully it will be a fast one, because the game was not that long, and I believe it should be, once again, I believe each game finished with over 90%, and as you can tell, yeah, 98, 97.5, so pretty obvious that the game was equal all the way around, and that's that. Thank you all for watching. We'll see each other. Bye bye.